Get ready to talk it out on this snooker blog. Let's have a discussion with a friend. We're never gonna give up. So let's talk about Dragon Ball, cause what else would we do? As I say, go Kamehameha. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, one and all, and happy Dragon Ball Day. On this, we're putting this out on January 7th, Saturday, when tonight will be the finally coming back onto Toonami where it belongs again. New Dragon Ball Z stuff in the US, both the premiere of Dragon Ball Super, as well as Dragon Ball Z Kai. The final chapters are both going to be happening tonight. And as such, we are continuing to celebrate what I kind of turned into Dragon Ball Week between our over 2 hour long discussion of the Future Trunks arc from Dragon Ball Super that just finished up airing in Japan recently. By this point, I've also put up my review of Dragon Ball Fusions. And today, for such a big day, I'm joined yet again by Mike Vegito EX. Welcome back, Mike. Hi, thanks for coming again.
Hello, it's just me this time.
Yes, not 7,000 people, although not that Scott and Mary were not a joy to have as we broke our record first thing out of the year. But yeah, that was a lot of fun too. And but today, I wanted to have you on for something a little different, a touch more in-depth. In fact, you know what, actually, so before we go into this, we gave our introductions before. But again, as this is the start of the new year, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and Kanzenshuu and your history with Dragon Ball on the internet and off the internet, etc. real quick.
Yeah, so I'm one of the 4 guys that runs the website Kanzenshuu. That's KANZENSHUU.com. If you track its history all the way back, I began it as Vegito EX's Ultimate DBZ Links page in January 1998. Transitioned to Vegito EX's homepage, transitioned to Daizenshuu EX, performed a little bit of Fusion, and here we are as Kanzenshuu. Several years later, the Fusion itself is hitting 5 years, which is crazy to me to believe that we've been doing that for that long. So I've been covering Dragon Ball. I'm not going to call it professionally because this is not my day job, actually. But this is something that I have been doing online for now 19 years, covering the news, the fandom, documenting its history in universe, out of universe. This is what I do. And so I'm really excited, glad to continue doing it, approaching 2 decades later.
Yeah. And I mean, as you often joke on, because of course, Kanzenshuu has a podcast as well, of which all of the crossover blogs that we do often appear on the feed of as well. There is always something new to be covering at every second of every hour by one of you 4 guys.
I know, it's really crazy. The podcast itself is over 11 years old now too. And every couple of years we're just in amazement of, can it really be that in the year 20XX that more is happening now than was in 1995? It's crazy, man.
And yet Dr. Wily's not making Robot Masters anymore, but nonetheless.
No, been there, done that with Garo, been there, done that with Mashirito. It's old hat now.
So I called you on today. I captured you yet again this week.
I hope I'm in the Master Ball. Come on, at least give me that much credit here.
Dusk Ball,
Oh, great.
It was no, actually, it's not even late at night. What the fuck am I talking about? I wasted a Dusk Ball on you. Good God. Nonetheless, so actually, it's funny. Earlier within the week. So actually, because blowing off the lid, we're recording this on New Year's Day. A little bit ahead of time, and so we're all party-hardied out. Anyway, earlier in this week, I was re-listening to a Kanzenshuu. My God, I'm slipping up already. Episode that we recorded actually over a year ago now. That was specifically about what defines music in Dragon Ball. For one thing, I couldn't even believe that it was that long ago we did that already. That was a really fun discussion that I loved getting to do. And I don't want to say quite that this is like a sequel to it, but it's another like in-depth like. Not even actually so much what defines Dragon Ball, but really what is Dragon Ball all about? And because it's funny, you don't think about, I think, super often the things that I wanted to cover in this one. They're just kind of like ingrained in the mythos and the kind of overall execution of the story and everything. And I guess also to blow the lid off something, maybe this might sound a little bit bad. Part of this topic was also inspired by my frustration with the fact that I feel like most people don't know how to describe the core themes of Dragon Ball when they're asked to describe it in whatever context. I was seeing a lot of like interviews and panels and things where like people have to surmise Dragon Ball in like 2 seconds, and they can't.
or what you'll typically get is alien punches other space aliens. Like, that's what people reduce the story down to. And yeah, that's what Dragon Ball is about, but that's not what makes Dragon Ball. And I'm glad that you are someone who likes to get that deep into the series, because these are the kinds of discussions I enjoy having the most. Yeah, I enjoy reviewing an arc, and I'll continue to do that as long as you'll have me on your channel doing that as well. I enjoy reviewing games and talking about some of the news, that kind of stuff, but really getting nitty-gritty with the themes of Dragon Ball. Not a lot of people get into that, and when they do, like you said, I feel like they don't go deep enough, and I feel like we're setting ourselves up for failure here. Like, well, they don't do it well enough. We're gonna set it up and knock it down. This will be the definitive discussion of Dragon Ball's themes. We'll try our best.
No, I mean, we're just gonna. This is, if anything, it's what I get away from. What I take away from this show, from this series, this franchise that I've been enveloped into for how it's been in the U.S. for how long now? Its presence is 20 years now.
Well, if you ignore Harmony Gold's first attempt at it, if you start with Funimation themselves, the Dragon Ball TV series began in 1995, 13 episodes and 1 movie, skipped ahead to Z in 96, and here we are over 20 years later.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been following it for almost all 20 of those years, and there's a good there are several good reasons we're going to go into as to why it is so special to both of us, really. And this is stuff that, like, I think I've had offhanded conversations with people about at different points, but certainly not doing something like this. And likewise, I'm glad that I have you on this, because I know that you can you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. When I pitched the outline, you were already like, I'm in. This is good.
Right. And you know what I enjoy about this is you get to lead the discussion a little bit, and I like having my brain picked sometimes more so than leading the discussion, because then I feel like it jogs my memory and my imagination a bit more. So I like kind of being in the hot chair a little bit.
Truthfully, these Curblogs are just you taking a break from being a host for once, because you're doing that every episode on your own podcast.
Right. A way I want to set this up, and this is going to be really difficult. I already just took host back from you. Sorry. Like, I can't avoid doing it.
No, please take it all from me. Go ahead.
Sometimes it's going to be a struggle for us here as well to separate the themes from the archetypes in the show. Things like wise old master, that's an archetype, and that ties into some of the larger thematic discussions. So I do want to differentiate between those, but just know that they're going to kind of wind through and through each other as we have this larger discussion.
For sure. Like specific characters will be coming up at different points. Certainly ones that will show up more than once in each of the. I've written down about 5 major points that I wanted to hit up in kind of a ascending order, descending, because I think that they're deeper with each one, in my opinion. But also, I think to start off with as well. So I was kind of implying about my frustration with some of the other folks that I would see try to describe it, and often in like a serious kind of way of like, well, so Dragon Ball Z is about blah, blah, blah. It's like in like a real kind of way. But often what it usually gets described as in those kind of contexts, and I won't name names because I don't want to like rip on people. I'm not trying to like poke fun or whatever, but it's usually like, well, it started as a like a parody of the Monkey King, and I'm like, yeah, it started that way for about 5 seconds in the grand scheme of things, and but then also when they continue, it turns into, and then this alien comes down and then captures the sun, and etc. And I'm like, stop, please.
The classic God. No one watched Dragon Ball response. And I had, as I was going through your notes, I'm scribbling things down here. I wrote, do I want to get into a little bit of this Journey to the West stuff, because I feel like that does start to get into a little bit of the archetype versus thematic discussion. But I do think it's important because, as you said, people start there, and I don't want to toot my own horn. Like, I have actually read Journey to the West. I have read the complete unabridged Journey to the West. I don't know as much as other people when it comes to Chinese literature, but I've at least read it, and I somewhat know what I'm talking about here. Dragon Ball, yes, it begins as, if you want to call it a parody, more of like a takeoff of Journey to the West, where characters are playing certain roles from Journey to the West. Bulma is playing the role of the priest. Goku is literally taking his name from the Monkey King. Sun Wukong is Son Goku. Yamcha is Sandy there. Oolong is very much Pigsy there. I mean, some of that stuff is obvious. The cloud, the rod, the expanding pole. Yes, that's all Journey to the West. But the way that Dragon Ball is set up as a story is Journey to the West in a nutshell too. The way that every chapter of Journey to the West ends, and I love talking about this because it's such a corny thing, but I love it, is that the narrator comes in and he's like, and what happens at this point in time in this climactic battle between these two adversaries? We don't know. So let's find out together in the next chapter. And doesn't that sound familiar to you? Like,
yeah.
And yeah, the English dub played that up more so than in Japanese, where Yanami's narration was generally played pretty straight. But like its entire persona is coming from Journey to the West. In both cases, there's this larger goal. In Dragon Ball early on, yeah, it's collecting the Dragon Balls, but later on it becomes, defeat this great adversary, someone like Frieza, or, there's a war between these two different tribes or something like that. I mean, Dragon Ball doesn't quite, we're getting into a galactic fight between universes here, so maybe it's taken more than you think.
That's true. That's very true, yeah.
But if you think about it, like all these things, Dragon Ball retains that identity throughout its entire run, not just those early obvious visual allusions to Journey to the West. And I just think that's really important to drive home because it's that air of Chinese mysticism. Obviously have to throw in the term wuxia here, and I'm not the expert on wuxia, but it is that. And it's taking all of, yes, its archetypes, but also all of its themes from those prior stories. And Journey to the West is the main one. I
think often when you look at any kind of like comic series where it's generally the creator and then like their staff, often in terms of just the influence, it's pretty easy to see. I mean, like, you could look at almost any action Shonen Jump series, and you can see where a lot of them also took their inspiration from previous Shonen stuff, including Dragon Ball, more often than not. There's some influence in there somewhere. And with Toriyama, I mean, you can very easily see the Journey to the West influence all throughout, a lot of the Kung Fu movies. I know he said he's like a big fan of Jackie Chan movies and things like that. Absolutely. Which I think actually is a good kind of jumping off point into the first, and I think the most basic of things that I wanted to get
totally.
into.
And this comes from all of those previous wuxia tales, pushing one's limits. Yeah, man, like that is not just Dragon Ball, but the character of Goku in a nutshell. Dragon Ball is about all that other stuff going on, but making yourself better as a martial artist. Not as this, not as that, but as a martial artist, as a fighter, as a combatant in every way. And that's on a physical level, that's on a spiritual level. Anything that they can use to pull in and hone and refine to make themselves a better fighter, that's what Dragon Ball is about.
When once we got past the first the Emperor Pilaf arc, as it is, and we had gotten past the initial, okay, I've basically done my take on the Monkey King / Journey to the West-esque kind of journey story. And we had what eventually became the first Tenkaichi Budokai / World Tournament arc after that, which I think personally was the first one that really got into, okay, this is what's going to more so define the type of stuff that Dragon Ball would be about. Not just because of it being about tournaments or whatever, because of course we've had many, many, many of those throughout the series, but specifically about the training side of things, and the honing your skills with Roshi being at the forefront, and then Goku and Krillin before now it's the Goku and Vegeta training show all the time. But this particular thing being introduced through Roshi first and foremost with his Jackie Chun disguise, and actually this is something that I find very poignant personally, because this is something that applies not just to martial arts but to any form of skill that you're developing. And there's always someone out there who's going to be better than you at what you do. It doesn't matter if you're a martial artist or an animator or a bank teller. I don't fucking know. Like,
you're absolutely right, because everything that we continue to see now, even in Super, characters like Hit, characters like Beerus, characters like the Omni King, Zen-O. Yes, there's always someone out there who's better than you. And Dragon Ball, originally in the manga, ended on this note with, and there's so many more great adventures out there to tell, these stories to tell, so many other strong dudes out there. Isn't this amazing? Isn't that just an eye-opening, wondrous revelation to have? And we still have that, but like you said, it was solidified in that first tournament. What I love about Kame Sennin, the Turtle Sage, Master Roshi, he adopts the persona of Jackie Chun. He does that for a variety of reasons. Some of them are practical, but some of them are also emotional as well. He wants to prove to the kids that there's someone out there stronger than them, but he also does it in this very heartfelt way where he doesn't personally have to be responsible for shutting them down and destroying their ideals. Like, oh, well, of course my master beat me. No, he does it in a way that shows them, look, isn't it neat that there's someone stronger than you out there? Oh, I don't know who he is. Like, no, don't worry. I'm not over here. Obviously, other characters are a little smarter than Goku, but that's Toriyama writing to me in a nutshell, where it's so smart, it's so clever, but it's so obvious at the same time.
It's interesting too, because in some ways there's always got to be somebody stronger kind of thing. In some ways has often been like, I think by a lot of people who are a little more pessimistic about the series, been like a weakness in that it's like, okay, and then will we beat this guy? So now we got to have someone stronger than them introduced, and oh god, how do we top this?
Yeah, that's the shonen power creep. And if there was a better way to get around that, someone would have already. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is something like that out there. I'm not the most well-read when it comes to things like independent comics, whether it be in English or otherwise. But shonen is popular because it is about that idealism of the young boy coming up against greater adversaries. And, it's just easy to come up with one after the other, and it just kind of works out that way.
For sure. And I think that, like, by and large, considering, you could probably say that a lot of the writing for Dragon Ball as Toriyama was creating it, especially later on by the time he got to the Boo stuff, a lot of it was very like, all right, well, I don't entirely know what's going to happen next. Maybe I have got some ideas, but I'm going to kind of play it by ear. And there is some magic to that too.
Another thing he said is that he wants it to be, he said this most recently and with the newer productions, he wants his stuff to just be pure entertainment. He doesn't want you to think too hard about it, because at the end of the day, it is still a series for young boys. Shonen literally means young boy. It's for children. And of course, Toei and Shueisha's goal is to indoctrinate you as a child, to sell you nostalgia in another 10 years. But coming from Toriyama's perspective, and if we're talking about the original series, the manga, from the pen of the author himself, that's his goal, is to just write a fun, entertaining series for young boys. And I know we talked about this on our review of the Future Trunks arc from Super. It's not going to get too much more complicated than that. He's going to walk the line at times. I think the Cell arc and then in Super, the Future Trunks arc is probably the most complicated you're going to get out of Toriyama.
For sure. And no, there isn't anything wrong with that. And I think that it being kept simple and the fact that, like, there is a lot of this just like, okay, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants and whatever comes out. And, there is some magic to that. And there's a lot of value to that because it's still coming from the heart, I would like to think, I guess like just from thinking from an artist and a storyteller's perspective. But going back to Goku as well, because I think Goku and Vegeta exemplify the pushing one's limits, theme, like more than probably any other characters in the entire show. With Goku, like it's established literally from the beginning that, he is some kind of like, before we knew he was obviously an alien, he's some kind of super being that can, take being shot in the head or getting hit by a car, depending on what interpretation it's and the fact that like, that Roshi, sniffs that out already. It's like, okay, this kid is already far beyond what I can possibly imagine. but I don't want him to get too ahead of himself. And even if you look at later, like in Super, Beerus pulls the same kind of thing where he has Monaka as kind of the
right.
the literal red herring of like, all right, well, I don't want him to know that he is possibly the strongest in both of these universes.
Yeah.
For all he knows, because I think that in that way, what I think is being said with that is it's like, sure, but you should never stop learning. You should never stop trying. And Goku and Vegeta, for different motivations, I think at times, are they're the type of people that don't want to stop, that don't want to. You just be like, okay, no, I'll just rest on my laurels. Nah, I'm cool the way I am. I mean, even I was just rewatching the end of the original run of Kai, where they end with Cell being defeated, and when it looked like at that point, okay, well, I guess Goku's adventures are going to continue in death, and he's going to find these old martial arts masters that have passed away, and stuff like that. And like every time I see things like that makes so much sense to me, and I feel like that's a good thing to impress on readers, because again, no matter what it is that you're focusing on in your life, like I think about for myself, for instance, like I am constantly pushed to do better by the fact that I am friends with and see constantly every day on every feed of social media amazing artists and animators and people like that who inspire me. Like, man, I want to get to be that good someday. I want to keep going. I never want to like peak and stop and like, this is my limit. This is as far as I go, and I'll just be content with being a Yamcha or a Tenshinhan or whatever. It's like, no, I want to keep going because like, I'm getting excited by all of these guys. I'm literally quoting Goku.
Waka waka. Yeah. For Goku though, I find it really important to note that for his character, it's generally less about seeing that, like this flies in the face of what we were talking about. For Goku, it's usually not that there's someone out there stronger than him. It's usually him about besting himself. And along the way is when he comes up against these greater foes. But in general, he's always pushing to do better on his own, which I think sets up the other characters who then look to Goku, whether it be Kuririn, whether it be Tenshinhan, whether it be Piccolo, whether it then be Vegeta. These are then the other characters that come in that see Goku as like this unachievable goal, but they're going to try to achieve it anyway. So we have these, like we were talking about, these archetypes of the old masters setting up Goku to then set up his peers. I think that is Dragon Ball in a nutshell.
Which I think beautifully goes into the next point. It's kind of a sequel to this first one. The idea of raising all tides. And we've talked about many master characters. As Goku has had, I think, maybe like 4 or 5 different like teacher kind of characters at this point. Between we had Roshi, we had Kami, we had
don't forget Karin there.
Of course, Karin as well. We had I guess King Kaio-sama as well. Beerus and Whis kind of collectively, it's the idea of especially as further characters get older and then newer characters are introduced, particularly the children of the previous generation of characters, the idea of not simply passing the torch but making sure that the next generation is prepared at what's to come. And we were talking about Roshi earlier. It starts with him, and it continues throughout a long time. Then kind of shifts a little bit as things change, but it continues, I think, arguably with Goku, because we have Gohan, who is kind of forced into the position of like, well, this is also partially your responsibility to deal with this now because of what's about to happen to our planet. So, have fun with that. You're going to train with Uncle Piccolo now. And then even by later in the Boot stuff where, Goku's kind of whole deal with, wanting the people that are actually alive by that point, which I'll get more into that a little bit later, but, him wanting to train Goten and Trunks and everybody too. A lot of that, I think, is a great evolution of going from like, I'm pushing my limits and I've gotten to this point, but also I want to bestow upon people that are younger and up and coming, what it is that I know so that they'll also be better and we'll all be getting better and raising our tides together. Like that, is also something I fully relate to in my own life as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those key points. The first we already talked about was at the 21st tournament. And part of that also ties in with point number 3 that we're going to get to, which is going to be the hubris that these characters exemplify over the course of the series. But then I think one of the lesser but equally important examples is during the 22nd tournament when Ten Shin Han really turns around and sees the world for what it is and these other characters for who they are. And that amazing, especially in the TV series, where you have it just tears at my heart knowing that Miyauchi and Suzuki have both passed now, but that conversation they have, man, that just it nails it, where Kame Sennin is really like, here's the deal, here's what's going on, here's why this is important to me. And there's no true greater threat out there at that point. It's all infighting among these two rival schools. But that's so important because it then sets up all the later stuff when we do get to those galactic battles. Gohan at 2 points during the Saiyan arc, and then again during the Cell arc, and then, as you said, again during the Buu arc. You kind of have to look at the external factors for this too. The way that Toriyama's writing this, they didn't want him to age up Goku. And I say they, I mean his editorial staff there at Shueisha. That wasn't a thing that they did, because if you change the look of your character that dramatically, your audience, and this is the thinking at the time, can no longer relate and feel like that is that exact same character anymore. And I know a lot of people have that problem with Goku when he grows up for the 23rd tournament, and again with Gohan as he grows up over the course of the series. Like, is this truly the same character? Well, yeah, it really is. And so we get that with Goku, but then again, like you said, during the Buu arc, where it's Toriyama doing that, I think I want to go in this direction. I don't entirely want to go in this direction. I'm going to course correct, and nope, it's all about Goku. So like, he introduces this theme, and most of the time he rips it away from us again, where, yep, we've raised this up and we've set up this other, never mind, it's the Goku story.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, another weakness of the kind of on the fly sort of deal with it. Actually, I will say, going back to the bit about aging the characters, I mean, for one thing, of course, we can't imagine it any other way. Part of me almost wishes that other, if not just shonen series, just other series would do that more often, because I think that while in some ways I can see why that's perceived as like stereotypical of like, and then we have it be about the children or whatever, like,
right,
of course,
right.
Naruto and Boruto is happening with that right now. But I think that in some ways that is often the proper evolution. So it's not just like, and I know I sound like I'm being a hypocrite because I often defend Ash from Pokemon with this kind of point, but Pokemon is a very, very different kind of animal.
Oh, the forever 10 years old kind of thing.
Yeah. And I understand the frustrations with that, and I can understand like both sides of that sort of situation. But regardless, I think that for something like this, it makes sense because that's the proper evolution, because it ties in with what it is that we're the main point we're talking about here, where it's like, okay, you want to progress.
Right. How can you strive for something if time doesn't pass?
Yeah. Or not even just so much that time doesn't pass, but that like the characters themselves are not progressing, that they're not continuing forth. I mean, like, I was saying that about Ash when I was doing a big review about the Pokemon X and Y series, where, if you just look at that show by itself, there is a lot of incredibly good character development and growth for all of the main characters in that series. And, it's interesting because a lot of people will say that not very many characters in Dragon Ball develop. Like, some people say it's only like Gohan and Vegeta and maybe like some of the other ones have like little mini arcs, and
oh, come on. I mean, forgive me, but that is the classic response of someone who didn't read the first part of the series, who didn't watch the first 153 episodes. Like, that is where you learn who these characters are. This is where those characters develop. After that, from Raditz onward, that's the payoff for all the development you've gotten so far.
Yeah, I mean, like, because that's the thing is, by the time that we get to the Saiyans coming down and it's, you know, our heroes reunited together and everything, yeah, that is the payoff of like, hey, we've had our development, we've had our arcs, we are who we are now, and then we're trying to do our best, and then they heroically sacrifice themselves in this, you know, as the tide is raised and the threats get bigger and crazier. You know, that's kind of the unfortunate thing about, I think, our country's overall fandom of this franchise, and that it's all the tunnel vision of Z and nothing else around it.
And that being said, so let's hone in on two of those Z specific examples. One of which is Goku setting up Gohan as the hero for the Cell arc. What I love about that is, and again, this is going to tie in with Hubris for your next point there. This is a weird mix of Goku having so much pride in his son mixed in with just being completely illogical, completely naive, completely wrong about everything that he thinks. Even everyone around him telling him he's wrong about what he's set up for the hero. It doesn't matter because ultimately he still has to sacrifice his own life to prove that point. But then with Goku and Trunks and Goten setting up, that was a weird one to me because I feel like that one doesn't ring true as much, as it's kind of like this offhand comment, and I don't buy it anymore because of what Toriyama has done with Gohan over the course of the series. Like I don't actually believe Goku when he says, you know, I could have defeated Boo. Not that I don't believe the strength stuff, but I don't believe where Goku's coming from when he's setting it up as I could have defeated Boo, but I want the kids to be able to do it. That doesn't sound right to me. That doesn't quite sound right.
Well, I think that also part of on the case of the Boo example, which that is exactly what I was thinking of, was when they're on the Kaio planet and they're about to fight Kid Boo and he's having that little like thought to himself. I did like that, but I think it's true that it also does kind of get canceled out by the fact that I'm back now, even though my whole thing was like, I'm gonna stay dead so that I don't, you know, attract more
right.
villains.
I'm responsible for all this. Take responsibility for it. But in the end, it's Toriyama. He can't commit to that. And we also know externally by this point, Toriyama is on his third editor, not just overall, but in Dragon Ball specifically. Kazuhiko Torishima ran from all of Dr. Slump into Dragon Ball. By this point, he's on his third editor, Fuyuto Takeda, who actually Majin Buu was based on in terms of appearance a little bit, but also Toriyama has said he was the most lax of his three editors. So Toriyama was kind of left to his own devices where he could do whatever he wanted, and he didn't have anyone sitting over him really going, no, we think you should go in this direction. Let's try to have a consistent story here. He did whatever he wanted. He was also, I mean, we know in hindsight, he was approaching the end of his serialization. How much he knew at what point is a little up to debate, but he was just trying to get to his end goal, which was, can I please stop working every week?
You know, it's interesting too, I guess, worth hitting up while we're still on this point, is Oob. And, you know, at the moment, we're still not entirely sure about how things are going to go with Super in terms of like, if it's going to actually lead. Because actually, what I was kind of surprised about by this point, considering Toei's like, you know, probably plans in terms of, you know, creating stuff, is I'm almost kind of surprised that when they did Dragon Ball Kai, the final chapters, that they did the last couple episodes of the original Z with, you know, where they flash forward and Pan is born and Oob shows up at the tournament and everything, because I figured, well, do you want to commit to that at this point? Because if, you know, Bra's not been born yet in Super, and like all this other stuff hasn't happened quite yet. And not to get into the discussion of that or whatever, but nonetheless, what I bring that up for is because the ending that Toriyama was finally like, okay, I'm taking a break, I'm out of here.
Right.
Here's my
I know. He ended the series with doing this again. And that's why I continue to come back to, I don't believe you. And sure enough, in GT, what the hell does Oob amount to? Nothing. It's like, even without Toriyama, they didn't want to commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of a shame, because I feel that's also why this is higher up on the list, because it's one of the lesser deep themes. But nonetheless, you know what? I think that the one that's worth focusing on the most, and I think that people probably agree on, is what happened with Gohan during the Cell stuff. And actually, funnily enough, Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku in the Funimation English dub for now 15 years, I think. He was making an interesting point because he really enjoys that part as well with Gohan. And he was making a point about maybe Goku might have been like smarter than everybody expected him to be in terms of like maybe his long game is, you know, a little bit better than anybody expected. And the fact that it is kind of like, you know, did he plan for all of this? You know, was this taking him by surprise, etc.? The fact that that is actually kind of like you're not totally sure sometimes is kind of cool. Like that is an interesting like story element for one thing. And the fact that it does ultimately come to pass, you know, including with his sacrifice. I think that Goku's sacrifice for that particular fight was what made the most sense, and then Gohan being the one who had to finish the job in the first place. I think that was the best way that they could have gone about it. I think it's been the most satisfying in terms of like, all right, well, you think it's going to be this person. Oh, wait, no, then it just ends up being Goku in the end because, you know, etc. Or this other character that's going to come in, you know, kind of thing. But I think that in terms of just everybody all wanting to these first 2 points in tandem with each other, pushing one's limits and raising all tides together collectively, I think that in some way almost every major character, including the villains, like the actual villains and the villains that have later gone on to be good guys or chaotic neutrals or whatever you want to declare that, I think that almost every character embodies that. That I think is great in terms of like it's an overarching thing that's consistent from the beginning all the way up until even now with the new stuff with Super.
Let's talk about how every character is completely conceited and idiotic and makes the worst decisions, because I kind of feel like this describes Dragon Ball more than anything else.
Oh, 100%. In fact, actually, when I have to describe Dragon Ball, particularly Z, more than any other, when I have to describe it to somebody that didn't really grow up with it or has that stereotypical, isn't it just people beating each other up and screaming? I'm like, no, it is a story about the strongest people in all of existence being a bunch of selfish assholes, and the fate of the universe rests in their hands. The hubris of all of the major characters, all of the major like good guys, or the protagonists at least, of this series. Certainly nothing but entertaining at the very minimal.
Well, I want to start this with actually reading a quote from an interview. This comes from Wired Japan, the first issue from 1997, which actually came out toward the end of 1996. This is something we paid a lot of money for, but I'm really glad we could get this issue to really translate what Toriyama is talking about here, because I think this sets up Goku as a character, and then all the other characters because of that. So they're talking a little bit about the popularity polls that they would run in the magazines, and Toriyama saying, I didn't really care about it that much, which I think flies in the face of all those rumors about, oh, he did this because of the character polls. Well, here we have Toriyama saying, I didn't really care about that. Who cares? He goes on, he says, since I did it half-cocked without deciding what would happen up ahead, like we were saying, it was easy enough to change up this sort of thing as the circumstances warranted. Even with characters that appear to be doing the right thing at first glance, and the person there at Wire goes, there's actually poison inside. Toriyama says, right, there's how, basically, Son Goku from Dragon Ball doesn't fight for the sake of others, but because he wants to fight against strong guys. So once Dragon Ball got animated, at any rate, I've always been dissatisfied with the righteous hero type portrayal they gave him. I guess I couldn't quite get them to grasp the elements of poison that slip in and out of sight among the shadows. And Wire goes, perhaps that's because it's animation aimed at children after all? And Toriyama's like, well, yeah, I guess that might be some of it too. I want to preface the rest of our discussion about this point by saying Toriyama's not talking about international adaptations. I kind of set this like series of, there's Goku in the manga, there's Goku in the Dragon Ball animated TV series by Toei Animation. Beyond that, there's Goku as written by primarily Takao Koyama in the animated films from Z, when it was still being produced. And then beyond that, there's the 1999-ish portrayal of Goku from Funimation's English dub. This is along that exponential scale of righteous hero up to literally Superman by the time we get to the end there. What Toriyama's talking about is primarily the movies here, a little bit in the TV series. So where do we want to go with this point that Toriyama's making and then the arrogance of the characters?
Two quick things I actually want to jump in on that actually as we lead into that. First of all, what you just described is exactly the reason why whenever the dude, remember how cool this moment was, and I see the ally to good, nightmare to you thing show up, every time I'm like, that's great, congratulations, that is not the character.
Right, you're 4 steps removed by that point. And come on, it's 2017. I hate that I have to say this, and I hate myself that I have to say this, but that was a product of its time. It was terrible. I don't hold anything against anyone on the production side for it. I was a fan at that time. That was not a product for me. I still think that's a bad product. I still think that's a bad representation of the series. They do too now, so whatevs.
For sure.
Water under the bridge. However,
everybody does. However,
like you said, it does affect this discussion, because if we're not talking about the same character, how do we have a discussion?
Exactly. But you know what? I think that, and actually another thing kind of to go with that, although I do see a lot of people that love that whole like personification, and also to just say this as well, because this is part of the reason I love Kai so much, is that now I think that we're, as you often describe, we're watching the same show. We're all watching the same thing generally in terms of how they get everything together with adaptation and everything, which is fantastic. But nonetheless, another kind of stereotype that I see about Goku in the US fandom specifically is a lot of people describe Goku as like a terrible person, like, oh, he's a bad father and he's a bad guy and he's an asshole and etc. And it's like, I don't think that Goku is a bad person, because I think that people forget the fact that, like, yes, he's done a lot of very selfish, stupid things, but he's also one of the biggest reasons that the entire, like, plane of existence, in some cases, is kept safe, because he does take responsibility for when shit happens, you know, and also, I mean, one of the biggest moments of the entire series, you know, when he transforms, is triggered by the loss of not even just a family member, but a friend that he cares about very, very much. So that in and of itself, I think, should prove, you know, those kind of, I think, unfair perceptions wrong. But nonetheless,
I think Goku will do the right thing, but it's generally as a result of something else. That doesn't mean he doesn't know that he's doing a good thing. Like, he generally knows that he has to protect people, and that he probably should protect people, and that he knows, like we were talking about with the Buu arc, where he knows he's a magnet for this type of destruction. Like, he does take some responsibility for it. But over the course of the entire series, in general, he's a very self-serving character. One of the worst decisions / best decisions was letting Vegeta go. And I hate that we have to go back to, well, in the dub it was this, and in the original it was this. Goku doesn't let Vegeta live because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He lets him live because he wants to fight him again. That's why he lets him live. Fuck everyone else on Earth. I want to fight that guy again. That's Goku.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it is made clear through almost every major adversary that Goku fights, especially in Z, where those characters are like, you know,
right.
like world-ending levels of, oh my god, you know, in some way, shape, or form, there is this sense of like, you know, I want to. I mean, actually, I think the biggest arc that has the most amount of examples of this this specific theme we're talking about is the Cell androids.
It absolutely is. I mean, whether it's the Goku and Vegeta both saying, "Don't you dare go destroy those androids. We want them to come out." I mean, it starts there and continues on to not shutting down 17 and 18 when they can later on as Cell comes out. Whether it's letting Cell continue to absorb people, whether it's letting Cell hold the Cell games. I mean, everything that they do is a stupid decision.
Hey, here, have a senzu.
Right,
Fight
right.
my son.
and even that started back at the 23rd Budokai, when not just I let Vegeta live, it's I let the reincarnation of the devil live. I just healed him back to full strength so I can fight him again. Like, Vegeta is old hat by the time we get that again. Goku literally just did that the previous story arc. And something I want to touch on before we go a little further is all these bad decisions are a result of what we're talking about. It's that arrogance. The earlier part in the series, they're all still developing as martial artists. They're gaining new masters. They're gaining new revelations about the world and how it operates and just how much more there is to this mysticism and larger universe. By the time we get to Raditz and these other characters, they should know better. But this is where it's just not clicking for them, and it continues not to click for them. And that's what makes them interesting characters.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like, because almost every major protagonist has a moment or two like this. You know, Goku and Vegeta, I think, arguably have the most overall. But then I think of Krillin and the android stuff, when, like, literally I kind of have a crush on this character that is supposed to be a villain. I'm not going to kill them because I would rather them just get away and escape, and we just try to kill Cell ourselves, etc. Like that kind of thing. You know, there's so many little things like that that happen all the time, but they're human things. They're all incredibly human or alien things that happen.
They're Ningen things, Chris.
Ningen.
You wouldn't understand. It's a Ningen thing.
but when they happen, I mean, I still even remember, like, when I first saw those moments, like, as they unfolded, like, I'm screaming at my TV being like, but also like, but I get it. Damn it, I get it. And I hate that I also get it, and I relate to this so much because it's true. It's so incredibly true. And the other thing is that what I love about it is that generally there is always some kind of major consequence.
Right. They pay for
back
it
to bite them in the ass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it's with their life on a character-to-character basis, or just larger ramifications for the world. Continuing into the Buu arc, again, it's a series of miscalculations and bad decisions. Whether that's Goku and Vegeta, Goku being like, yes, okay, I'm going to let you fight me. Let's go off and fight. And Goku starts to be a little smart there, like, maybe we should stop and not let Buu be resurrected. But then Vegeta takes the, nope, this is going to be, I'm going to take care of this. And he takes responsibility, but makes bad decisions the entire way along the course to taking responsibility. And then just from there on out, whether it's Goku, as he says, he could have defeated Fat Buu there, but he didn't do so because of blah, blah, blah. And just with every transformation along the way, just everyone's being dumb, but that's part of their character. And we're seeing the ramifications of that now in Super. I do think they are stringing us along a little bit, because Goku and Vegeta have learned a little bit, but not entirely, because we have these other characters here, like we were complaining about with Resurrection F, where there's that guy over there that could stop this at any point. Like, this battle doesn't matter at all because Beerus is sitting right down there.
Yeah.
But their Goku and Vegeta's relationship is evolving a little bit, where they know they have to fight together, and they did just that one time a little bit with Vegito there, and again that one more little extra time with Vegito there in Super. So, like, they're starting to realize it, but in general they still don't want to cooperate, and there are still bad decisions being made, but they also do see the universe for what it is now, or at least they're starting to.
I think actually also another great one on the note of just the punishment and the ramifications. Ramifications makes me think of all the GT DVDs where everything had to end with Asian. Was the fact that all the major villains as well, I mean, like, their undoing more often than not is how that happens every time. I mean, you know, between going back as far as Commander Red. Like, I want to be tall. Yeah, good. Bam, right in the head.
Wait, what? That's our end goal? Excuse me?
And a lot of them are as simple as that. I mean, King Piccolo or Demon King Piccolo with like, I hate martial artists because of my being tarnished, and then where he comes from, and why he wants to do that, and then that bleeds into what became Piccolo Jr. and the Piccolo that we know now.
Even Pilaf made bad mistakes, not just in the early arc, but in helping to resurrect Piccolo, thinking he's going to like live through. I mean, he's a gag character, so he's going to live through it. But like, that's not going to work out the way you think it is, buddy. Like, excuse me, you're talking to the devil himself here.
And then, Vegeta extensively we talked about when he was like flat out a villain. Frieza, I mean, Frieza is possibly the best, example of this in the fact that like, I often jokingly, but not jokingly refer to him as Space Hitler, and that he's like, I'm threatened by this entire race of people because I think that maybe someday they might be stronger than me.
Right, but Chris, he made the right decision. He wiped them out. He was smart about it. But the arrogance was, did I get them all? Well, I want to keep my pet over here. And, I didn't really know about this other one.
And then they all came together and, I guess I'm fucked, aren't I? Oh, then here's this other one that is the son of one of them that comes out of nowhere, and I'm in pieces now. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus.
Right.
And it's so satisfying. If you see that for the way it is, and you see what happens to him, like, I mean, like, I still remember, like, with all of the, the changes and the awful English adaptation we had at that time, but I still remember seeing when Frieza gets cut by his own disc attack.
Right, you can't change the visual there, so, I mean, that is what it is.
Well, unless you censor it, but thankfully, somehow that wasn't on Cartoon Network, weirdly. Anyway, but no, seeing that, it's and seeing that entire exchange, just the fact that there is an exchange and the fact that it is Goku doing this, it's like, this is what you deserve. This is what everything had built up to, and this is absolutely like the best way to go about, even though obviously, yes, afterward he doesn't actually die, but just the fact that he was humiliated by him.
Not just humiliated, but it's Goku who is the one to tell him through what I like to call the Bakayaro Kamehameha. Did you seriously? No, you didn't think this through because you are so blinded by your arrogance right now. As Kenshiro said, you don't know you're already dead. Like, let it go. You are done here, man. You are completely done. And so Goku has to be the one to tell him, you are an idiot. One last thing I want to talk about in terms of hubris, arrogance, being conceited, is where we are now in Super, which is taking on the gods themselves. And yes, we've had that over the course of the series, whether it be Earth's god. Goku was completely outclassed, not just by Earth's god, but by Earth's god's attendant, who had to teach him about what it's like to feel ki or power. Stop relying on your external senses. You need to bring this inside a little bit. So we went from Earth's god to Kaio, the Lord of Worlds, to the Kaioshin, the Lord of the Lords. And now we're up to the gods of destruction. We're above the gods of destruction, the Omni King Zen-O, literally the king of everything.
He's just my little friend, my little pet Pokemon friend guy that I hang out with sometimes.
And again, that's a mistake Goku made, where do I rely on this guy? Whoops, I relied on this guy and he wiped out existence as we know it here in this timeline. But this goes back to, again, what was Journey to the West about? Journey to the West, yes, was about this pilgrimage to get these sacred scrolls. Journey to the West was also about taking on the gods. Sun Wukong lost to Buddha. This is what Dragon Ball is about, where Goku and Vegeta and all these heroes are so arrogant about their power. Now they're realizing it a little bit and seeing what is out there in the entire universe and beyond into other universes. Journey to the West is still in Dragon Ball through these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's certainly the most entertaining, I think, going back to the early bit about just like, it's about entertainment. I think the hubris is one of the most entertaining and interesting things about the story of Dragon Ball. And I do agree about what you were saying right at the beginning. In some ways, it is the way, the simple way to describe it. It is all. The show is about the strongest people in the universe having the fate of the universe in their hands at all time, and they're all a bunch of selfish assholes. And it's incredibly interesting and intriguing.
Well, it's infuriating when it's the heroes, but it's satisfying when it's the villains. And again, that's what makes for a good story.
100%. Yeah. I guess now another thing that is, I think, one of the absolute defining factors of this. We were talking a little bit about this with, what ultimately became of Frieza, but this is something that applies to so many important characters throughout this entire show. The fourth point I have here is second chances. So often a point I make to my friends who I think friends of mine who haven't seen a whole lot of original Dragon Ball.
Oh my God, wasn't he a little shit at the beginning there when they were training? Whether it's drawing a different Kame symbol on a rock, again, this is where the development for these characters are. And this is when they get those second chances and they evolve into the characters that we love.
Well, see, that's the thing too. A lot of people I talk to about this where there's so much of this separation. This is a little off topic, but this is relevant. There's all this separation between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And oftentimes I have to tell people, well, that in the manga, it was all one big thing.
Yeah, next week, Raditz showed up in the exact same thing.
But because of the fact that they're labeled as two different shows, and especially because of in the US of them coming out in different orders and
even
all that stuff.
Viz fell victim to it. And it was smart of them to do it, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's the fact that Z, everybody has this tunnel vision on Z, and then even then some people are I like original Dragon Ball better and Z sucks or whatever. It's both of those kind of outlooks I think aren't the right way to look at it. It's better to look at it as all one big thing, because if you do get that all of this development in tandem matters with each other, it's important because, more back on point, you can look at, literally even technically Goku, from birth was this rambunctious little shit that was supposed to destroy the fucking planet, and then he hit his head, and then suddenly, oh, never mind, now he's okay. But at one point, he was a killing machine. He would have been, and then Bulma even was kind of a selfish jerk because she was I'm gonna wish for a boyfriend. Yamcha was a fucking bandit. Oolong was a creepo.
Tenshin Han was an assassin in training.
Krillin was just
a little prick of a dick.
Chaozu was, no better. He was also kind of a prick to Krillin. Piccolo, by the time the Saiyan stuff happens and he becomes the begrudging Uncle Piccolo and grows to love Gohan and sacrifices himself, and that's his, a lot of these second chances for these characters, they are redeeming themselves. They are learning, they are changing, they are developing, and they become who they are, And some of them are very, very long processes. We were talking about taking responsibility, like Majin Vegeta, when he sacrifices himself in that earlier part. I think the TFS guys were the ones that made the point of it's not until that point that he becomes a good person finally.
Yeah.
Because he's still completely in it for himself. He's still at the drop of a hat. Nah, fuck it. It's all about me. It's all about whatever I want and what I think is the best route to go or whatever because of my pride.
And that's the thing I like about Dragon Ball is that you have these two different avenues for second chances. You have characters giving other characters second chances. Again, my favorite being Kame Sennin and Tenshin Han. Man, come on, we're happy to have you join us. But then you also have the external factors in the series forcing characters into a corner of a second chance, and Piccolo is one of those examples where in the meantime he's been working on a way to kill Goku, but he recognizes I can't do that until I deal with this over here, and he's one of the best examples of he gets to kill two birds with one stone. He takes out the larger villain but also Goku at the same time. But again, that's what makes Dragon Ball so interesting, is that you have these different things going on that result in the same thing, which is a second chance.
Something this is kind of a cool little thing I noticed and more of my recent watch-throughs of the show when after they learn about how the androids are going to be coming in 3 years, and Krillin makes the point of if it weren't for the fact that we had somebody who was a bigger, badder threat that we all had to collectively work together on, people around here within our vicinity, I'm not going to name any names, Vegeta, Piccolo, would probably at this moment be maybe trying to conquer the world, maybe, you know,
Right.
whether or not he's totally right about that, if maybe a lot of them by that point had fully chilled out and it wasn't that big of a deal. But his point, I think, is still totally fair to make, in that it's like, yeah, these situations have brought a lot of these people that all used to be dicks together, you know,
Right.
and now they've all become, you know, certainly still very flawed people, hence the previous hubris point, but people that are trying to do good, like, you know, that are working the greater good, that are working like we're trying to prevent the planet from being fucking blown up.
They are, but a lot of those characters, Tenshin Han namely, it's all in the service of being a better martial artist. It's about proving myself. And even if I'm not going to succeed at that, I need to see how far I'm going to get along the way.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that them all like being allowed to have their own like selfish reasons for doing it,
Yeah.
I think is also perfectly fair. I think that it makes all the characters human, as opposed to, because when you really do think about that, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, it's just the group, most of which just sits by the sideline while the other more important characters get to fight the bad guy or whatever. It's like, no, they all have their reasons for contributing, you know, during each of these different points. And, you know, why they stop at certain points, why they continue at certain points, etc. You know, and a lot of it comes back to the fact that, like, well, I wouldn't be here if this didn't happen. I wouldn't be with this entire group of friends, these partners, these colleagues, were it not for the fact that I was given the second chance, by and large, most of the time, by Goku.
One of my favorite examples of filler material in the TV series is at the very end of the Cell fight when Gohan is struggling to overtake Cell. And that's when everyone else jumps in and they fire an attack and they all have this little monologue. And in general, I think Yamcha's is my favorite. It's the Goku is the one who like put me on this path. He's not here anymore. So I'm going to save his son instead because that's what I need to do right now. Like, oh man, like, oh, that hits me in the feels, if I may use an internet phrase.
No, please. I mean, you know, it's funny. I've had actually a few different discussions with Scott Kaiser Neko, and he's not here to defend himself, so haha, about that scene. I remember actually when you talked about how much you loved that scene.
I know it's cliche of me to bring it up, but I love it.
No, not at all. Because I remember actually you talked about that scene in, I think, a very, very early episode of your podcast, I think back when it was still Daizenshu, like that long ago.
Yeah.
And that made me, what you talking about it made me appreciate that scene a lot more. Scott and I have had discussions about how the debate of like, well, is that like fair, because also that was kind of meant to be another moment of redemption for Vegeta to get that hit in,
to get that last hit
or whatever.
But he still gets it. And yeah, I know it's supposed to be just him, and it still is in the TV series. It still is just him that gets that final distraction moment. So
yeah.
No one else really matters there, but they feel like they have to, because yes, it's the right thing to do. But again, as a friend, as a fighter, what else can I do?
I don't know. I adore that scene because I feel like that is such a great continuing payoff for like all of these guys who are here. They know that nothing that they do is going to matter in the long run. Nothing that they do is going to actually stop.
Right. It's not up to them.
Yeah, but the fact that like just they do it, and they have, each of them have those little internal monologues, or like Krillin has his external one. The fact that like they all get that moment, I love that. I love that because it's still, it makes everything in this entire show, like that kind of stuff, it makes all of it worth it. It makes everything feel like everything was mattering up until this point. And all these characters.
Everything was mattering. Like you get so into it, you don't even use words anymore.
Like, I'm making up words. What am I? Where am I? Who am I? God.
Well, at this point, we're pretty much talking about your final point, which is everyone working together. And yes, this is a shonen trope, but it is the underlying theme of shonen camaraderie, which is everyone comes together. And this does fly in the face a little bit of everything that Toriyama normally does, where it's about the self and bettering oneself. But when it comes down to it, if they have to defeat someone through teamwork, what else are you going to do?
If you think about, okay, let's break this down actually, because I think that this is interesting. If we look at maybe even just Z for the moment, the battle with Vegeta between him and Goku and the gang that were, still alive by that point.
Right. Well, Goku was trying to do it alone.
And that didn't work out so well. Right. It worked out with him being squeezed to death.
Before that, it was a team-based battle, then it turned back into a single battle, and then it turned back around again into a team-based battle.
And then with Frieza, even though it was a battle, it was many people leading all the way up until it was Goku versus Frieza. But even then, that was also the final battle. Also involved like people on Earth and people in the godly realm, and like Kami being back to life, and the Grand Elder coming back to life, etc. Like that was a big team effort.
Right. It was all the discussions going on around the fight, and Goku trying to get it back to being a singular battle, which again, so we're trying to talk about camaraderie, and everything keeps coming back around to I just want to fight alone. But they were all helping out. It was please get everyone away from here so I can go all out and not worry about them.
Yeah. In some way, there had to be some kind of major collaborative effort to eventually, through whatever means, typically with either Goku or Gohan, being the one to finish the job. But nonetheless,
let's kind of roughly go through all the main villains. I mean, it's not going to take that long. And if we start with Pilaf, he's not really the villain. The villain ends up being Goku, and that is a team effort to bring Goku down and get out of there. But then we go on to the tournaments. There's not really villains there for a while. The villain is, I don't know, again, their own arrogance that Kami Sennin's trying to put in place. Red Ribbon Army, Goku does it essentially alone. He's got a little bit of help along the way with some of the side diversions, but the final assault is just Goku himself does it.
Yeah.
Then we move on to Tenshin Han and Suru Senin. Again, it's a tournament. It's villains. Tenshin Han's doing some real shitty stuff, but it comes around again. Then we get what is really the first true villain of the series. But that ends up being a single battle again. We had help along the way. People were trying to put him down, but Goku lost. I mean, forget Beerus. Goku lost to Piccolo during this arc. And this was definitely the bettering myself. The world is too big out there. I need to take care of this. And yeah, people tried along the way, but it ended up being Goku. So then we get to 23rd Budokai. And again, is it really a villain? Yeah, it is a villain because he wants to kill Goku and he's kind of causing destruction. But it ends up being a one-on-one battle. People help along the way, I guess, through like wearing him down? Not really. It's a tournament. Whatever. Then we get to the Saiyan arc, and like we were just talking about, it was group battles, single battles, group battles along the way.
Well, actually, going back a second ago to Raditz, I mean, we hit up the bit about Piccolo, killing both of them, but the fact that, like, the main hero and what was previously the main villain having to work together to defeat the next villain.
That's the ultimate teamwork, for sure.
And the main hero sacrificing himself technically to the previous villain. There's something kind of really amazing about that.
Right.
Like, that's a really, really cool device. And then, leading into the battle with both Nappa and Vegeta eventually, that was everybody versus these two guys.
Well, sorta. I mean, it starts again as a series of one-on-one battles. First, we're going to have the Saibai Men fight, and it's going to be a one-on-one until someone dies as a result of it, and we got to take out multiple ones. This is getting too dangerous. But even then, they start going back to one-on-one fights. We have Tenshin Han versus Nappa. Like, this is not working. We have to collaborate on this. It's like every time they try to do a single battle, they start heading toward team battle, but it comes back around again to single battle.
Yeah.
Except when it doesn't.
Well, I think that with Vegeta specifically, even though that is labeled as Goku versus Vegeta, and for a while it is, I think that in terms of him getting defeated, it was Goku, Gohan, Krillin, and even to some extent Yajirobe.
Oh, to a huge extent, absolutely.
Fair enough. He gets the tail slice, so, and then promptly gets.
I mean, if we're going to talk about Vegeta collaborating in the defeat of Cell, we have to give Yajirobe like a thumbs up here, dude.
Yeah, true enough.
We already talked again about the entirety of the Frieza arc. We talked about the entirety of the Cell arc. We talked about the Buu arc.
Well, actually, you know what? I do want to talk about the Buu arc because even though. So actually, in the podcast episode we did over a year ago now about the music and everything, I talked about how the final battle with Kid Buu is my favorite moment of the series. And specifically, my favorite moment is both the creation of the big final spirit bomb that eliminates Buu, and also just the fact that it is literally everybody It's everybody, whether it's, Mr. Satan calling for help, Boo causing a distraction, followed by Vegeta causing a distraction, etc.
Right.
Goku landing the hit, the two different sets of Dragon Balls being used, Dende and the Supreme Kais and everything. And then technically everybody on Earth who's donating energy in some way. It's, that entire fight with Boo from like first form up until his final pure form or whatever, like that is everybody gets a shot at one point, but that last, like literally the last attack against Boo is everybody in existence that I mean, literally there's like, hey, here's 17, hey, here's Launch, here's all these other characters for 5 seconds, here's all these guys from Dragon Ball popping up for a minute to help out in some way. Like, that to me is so incredibly worth the entire journey, from everything from the beginning all the way up until the end, to what was essentially going to be the end up until the little bit with Oob after that. Like, I adore that final push with defeating Boo so much. That is still my favorite scene in the entirety of Dragon Ball everything. And it is because of this last theme that it embodies of everybody all collectively working together in this incredible way, and how satisfying that is.
And this is the one time that the Genki Dama, she said, the Spirit Bomb, actually works. Do you think it loses any of its splendor due to the early Z movies, where we get it in movies 2, 3, 4, and then again in 7?
You know what? I think that thankfully for me, because I had really only seen a couple of them at the time, and also the fact that they didn't leave like a massive impression on me compared to the moments that would happen in the show. I don't actually think that it did mess it up too much. And also because, and I think what differentiated it was the fact that like it was pushing further. It was still bigger and better and like more in depth.
Everyone on Earth,
everyone on Earth, everyone around, and everybody also like giving everything that they had in order to make it as strong as it could possibly be. And even
I don't know, man. When that deer falls over in movie 3, like they were giving everything they had too.
Well, they were giving everything they had because the fucking Tree of Might was sucking everything away. But let's not talk about that. But nonetheless, I think I think that moment actually embodies almost everything all together, and in some ways it embodies something about all 5 of these themes, because actually, you know what? Let's even think about that. Pushing one's limits. Everybody pushes themselves to give as much as they possibly can, 110% for this one final push. Raising all tides, I guess, kind of goes hand in hand with that. The hubris of just, the fact that they got up to that point.
Right, it was their arrogance that caused them to get there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't get the help if they didn't give that person a second chance, yeah.
Yeah, and also even Goku's last words of like, hey, I hope you come back as a good guy someday, because I would like to fight you as a good person.
Back to number 1 again.
Yeah. Yep. And, and then working together. Like, I think that in some way, this moment with beating Boo, it's all 5 of those things that I love about this series, all embodied into one single attack, with amazing animation and amazing screaming and amazing music all together, and then etc. It's all, I've said etc. so many fucking times in all of these discussions. What else is there to even say?
There's so much more to say, and a lot of it feels like we just are listing examples and saying this is what happened, but that gets you so excited when you talk about these things that you love so much. Forgive us.
Well, you know what? And also, kind of going back to one other little side thing that we mentioned earlier about other Shonen Jump artists and everything, you see how much things like this, even if it was, it might have been subconsciously, or, hell, probably a lot of these artists probably broke it down more in depth than even we are, I would imagine. A lot of these things, I think, that haven't, people who have been inspired by Dragon Ball that have gone on to make, other successful series, whether it be One Piece or Naruto, or, probably even My Hero Academia, newer stuff like what we have now, in some way have taken a lot of cues from these specific things, these core things that are built into, and even if they're not always like, sprawled out, as obviously or whatever, from the characters talking about them or whatever, just the fact that like they're so consistent all throughout. These 5 things I find are the most consistent things that come up from beginning of Dragon Ball all the way up through the end of Z, and even are prevalent in some different forms in different places around GT and Super. Not quite as much, but they're around. I think that Super seems to be much more about just like the pure entertainment of it, as opposed to like the deeper things necessarily. But even so, like we at the time of recording this, the hit couple filler episodes just came in, and some of those things I think kind of reared their head in a very cute way with Goku and Hit's relationship in a way that I really enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, Mike, would you also say that in your years and years of covering the show, that do you think that in some way, whether it was subconsciously or otherwise, that these are the things that kept you coming back, that kept you so dedicated to this specific show for all this time?
Yeah, because like you said, they're all a loop back around again, and that's satisfying to see. That gives you closure, and it makes you feel good about what you've invested so much time into. You got to grow with these characters and see them accomplish and fail along the way multiple times and make stupid decisions multiple times over and over and over. But to see that payoff at the end, man, that feels great. And the journey was so amazing. And to know that there's more journeys to be had, that's awesome.
I guess my kind of final point about this is Dragon Ball is still, I feel in some ways, a series that gets a little bit more flack than I think it deserves when it comes to, if it's deserving of its success, if it's deserving of, or like, what's the big deal about it? Why do people like this? It's just people screaming. It's just people beating up each other. And you know what? Yes, there is a lot of entertainment value to just, it's cool when they, have a cool fight scene and they're shooting laser beams out of their foot or like, beating the crap out of each other and there's cool animation or whatever. Sure. Yes, that is entertaining. And it is entertaining for me to go back to see, the more badass moments that happen, etc. But you know what? I think that people who really invest and care about the series, especially the fact that that they are wanting to come back to this and they are wanting to watch it again and they are wanting to see this new stuff, whether it's, watching it again through Kai or, watching new stuff with Super or otherwise. You're welcome, Toonami. We're not sponsored. I swear to God. I just really love this show.
Lord knows I am not sponsored by anything associated with the English production of the show.
But I think that at its core, I keep saying that word, but really, because this stuff is just ingrained in everything that goes with this story, this long overarching story that has gone on for this long. I think that this is the stuff that keeps people coming back, that keeps people invested, that keeps people looking back and saying, you know what? No, it wasn't just, I watched this cool show on Toonami in the 90s or the early 2000s or whatever, and it was cool and it was my childhood. It's like, no, actually, Steve Yurko of the One Piece podcast always makes this kind of mocking comment about when people say, Dragon Ball Z was my childhood. And then we're like, Dragon Ball Z is our adulthood.
There's no separation for me. It is just my life.
Yeah.
So for me, 2 points on that. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, it's cool to talk about these awesome things that we saw on TV. And in this discussion, I gave a lot of credit to the TV adaptation. But if you really want to understand these themes, if I may channel our buddy Josh for a little bit here, read the goddamn manga. That is Toriyama's vision for this series. And I think you get such a better understanding of where he's coming from when you're reading it from himself. And yes, there is editorial influence on the manga. Of course there is. Dragon Ball is a piece of art, but it was also a merchandising powerhouse made to sell things. That series on the printed page exemplifies all of these things. And my second point, if I may, if you truly want to understand this stuff, maybe head over to the translation section of Kanzenshuu and read a few interviews. And by few, I mean dozens, if not hundreds of things with different production staff, Toriyama himself. Learn about what went into the production of the manga, of the TV series, of the movies, of the current stuff. There's a lot of thought that went into the creation of it. And when you hear how they developed it, why they developed it the way they did, you're going to get a better understanding of what it is. And I'm proud to be one of the 4 people that can bring that to you in a way that, quite honestly, has not been done better pretty much anywhere for anything. Sorry, not sorry.
I mean, I always give you guys all the accolades in the world because I fully agree on that. So no, these guys work hard. There's a huge archive of amazing stuff that is worth checking out on the site.
Look, if you want to read just one thing, just go read that interview from Wired from 1996-97, the first issue of 97 there. That's going to give you it is Toriyama at his most candid as shit was done for the time being. He wasn't working on anything. He had no ties to anything. He didn't care about any bridges that might be burned. He just said shit. Read that interview. That is going to teach you more about Toriyama and more about Dragon Ball than listening to us 2 idiots for the last hour and a half.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to.
Yeah, me too. Come back and listen more, please.
Please do. Yeah, and actually, I was going to say too, also to sort of close this out. Part of the other reason I think that inspired this topic is because I've been studying more about like film in general and breaking down a lot of like these, like core themes in general.
Oh, I know. Imagine if someone actually qualified to discuss this did so.
I mean, but that's where this intrigue comes from. And like as I've gotten older, like my interest in the in and out of universe reasons for why these things happen, for why, Toriyama made these decisions, for why certain things happen, throughout the manga, and also why things in the TV show happen, and etc. Those things are interesting to me because it also has to do directly with like, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to say with this? Because for myself as an artist too, I'm trying to figure out often with my own stories, what am I trying to say with this? And I feel like, okay, well, let me look at the stuff that is, the biggest influence to me. And Dragon Ball is always consistently, people that watch my stuff know, Dragon Ball influence is very plainly obvious in everything that I do. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to look at this. What is this about? Whether, he knew he was saying this or otherwise, which who the fuck knows? But, maybe he did, maybe he didn't at certain points, and some of the things we've talked about or otherwise, who knows? But analyzing, breaking this stuff down, it not only teaches me a lot, about what I want to do, but it makes me further appreciate the fact that, like, what? No, this isn't just some, stupid kids cartoon.
I know, right? Like I was talking about how Toriyama said, this is just entertainment. Please don't think too hard about it. What did we just do? We thought too hard about it and made it something far more than it was. But that is the unintentional genius of Toriyama. That is what Torishima saw in Toriyama, was a talented cartoonist, but a talented writer who could write his way into and out of corners by the seat of his pants and somehow make everything work and have the world fall in love with his creation.
So I think, my God, that's going to wrap us up. This has certainly become one of my new favorite topic discussion things you and I have done. I am very glad that you did it with me. I'm very glad that we had this conveniently on the Saturday that a whole bunch of great new Dragon Ball stuff is about to hit TV in the US again.
So what you're saying is I need to edit this in time.
Ready to go. You got a week. Ready to go. Mike, thank you, as always, both for editing it, also just for being part of this.
No, thank you, because other people are sick, or in the case of someone else, lost his voice. So my podcast for the week got thrown out the window. So...
Go. Well, I'm glad I've been convenient for you as well. All right. I guess to everybody, happy Dragon Ball Day. If you are able to, through some legal means, watch Dragon Ball Kai the Final Chapters and Dragon Ball Super tonight on Toonami, please do. Please enjoy all this stuff all over again. And maybe, I don't know, if you never thought about some of this stuff before, maybe think about it as you're watching it tonight. Or, I don't know, be amused by Goku being a radish farmer, or Gohan being in high school and Videl being adorable, because that's what I love. And that's going to wrap us up. I think that's it for me and Mike. Mike, plug your stuff as usual, as always. Go ahead.
www.kanzenshu.com. Read that Wired interview. That's it.
Cool. And follow him on Vegito EX on Twitter and Kanzenshu Facebook page, all that stuff. I'll have all the links in the description. You can follow me on all the usual stuff. I guess in the comments below, tell us, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have other themes, other particular deeper things that you kind of took away from Dragon Ball that that you think we should have talked about, that you would like to add, any other particular moments that maybe we didn't talk about that some of these themes apply to. Anything else, all that you want to add to this, please do. I would love to see your thoughts. And if you're excited about the addition of the new shows tonight, and technically old shows with a new flavor tonight, let me know your thoughts as well. I hope that you'll be watching it. I hope you'll be celebrating Dragon Ball Day with us. There's a hashtag as created by Chris Sabat in celebration of this. So we love this. We love the show. We love all of you. We love each other. And don't stop. Don't stop. We're in luck now.